for mayor. This was after he was the lead of the Dead Kennedys. The Dead Kennedys performed here. This was then Mabuhay Gardens. Does anybody remember that? Well, I know that his platform was he was going to have all businessmen wear clown suits. Oh, there's always room for Jell-O. That was his slogan. Okay. Yeah. Does anybody want me to repeat the live stream, San Francisco Neighborhood Network on Facebook, or Broadway Studios venue? Tell your friends. Everybody hear me? All right. I want to thank all of you for coming and helping us make democracy fun. Our thanks, of course, have to go to our very hardworking candidates who have the hardest job of all. I would also like to thank, before I even introduce myself, the people who have let us use this space. That would be Francesca, Carl, and Eric of Fame Venue, or Broadway Studio. I'm Daniela Kirschenbaum of the San Francisco Neighborhood Network, and with Jerry Crowley up here in front, we have been a neighborhood-oriented group since 2003. In a very quiet way, we've been meeting with planning professionals and politicians, trying to make relationships and make neighborhood issues heard. And that's what we're doing here tonight. If you would like to ask some more questions, keep them short and keep them legible, and we'll hand you a card. I would also like to just explain a little bit about how we got here to this place with these candidates. Last week we held a different forum in a different neighborhood, and we invited all the candidates, and we were happy to do that. This time, in order to be able to dive a little deeper into each issue, we reduced the number of candidates as a compromise, and we will have longer answer times. This time we will have 2 minutes. We'll see how that goes. We did invite all the top polling candidates. Not all of them accepted. So to answer your question, yes, we did invite London Breed. We also had a wild card candidate, so we have another candidate up here, and we're happy to include her. She'll introduce herself shortly. And then we're going to take a break in the middle of our program to offer the stage for just a minute or two to any other candidates on the ballot who were not able to be up here on the stage. I hope that's clear. We're trying to balance everybody's desires. All right, so some ground rules. We'd like you all to be respectful. We would like your signs to stay below eye level. And to try to avoid distractions. We are live streaming this on Facebook, San Francisco Neighborhood Network, or Broadway Studios venue. And with that, I would like to introduce our moderator, who has been a TV newsman for more than 30 years. He is the winner of a national Emmy and 2 regional ones. And he was just nominated for 2 more Emmys this past week for his coverage of the North Bay wildfires. He has covered all manner of catastrophes, earthquakes, riots, and explosions. And don't forget, San Francisco politics. So from KPIX TV, please welcome Joe Vasquez.
Thank you. On behalf of KPIX5, it is my pleasure to be here on this historic moment. This campaign is making history. As Daniela said, this will be streamed on Facebook Live, so we do want to be respectful in a way that's appropriate for Facebook. Thank you. So, we're going to mix it up tonight. As Daniela said, the first forum last week with the San Francisco Neighborhood Network had a format that was rather on the strict side, right? You had 1 minute to answer a question. It's very difficult. These are tough issues to answer in 1 minute. It's one question per candidate. We're going to do it a little differently today. We're going to expand. We're going to have a big chunk of time having a discussion, a conversation that will allow us to elaborate on some important issues. I will elaborate on that in a moment, but first I would like our candidates to introduce yourselves, and if you don't mind, we'll start right here with Amy.
We have 2 minutes.
2 minutes for your introduction, that's right, 2 minutes each.
Hello everyone, I am Amy Farah Weiss, and whoever becomes our next mayor must focus on stabilizing our systems and our neighborhoods and our neighbors in crisis, and I bring a unique view to and experience to this work because I have 20 years of experience working in direct service in a variety of fields, starting in those direct service positions and then also working on program development and program evaluation, and have started a couple nonprofits including Neighbors Developing Divisadero and the St. Francis Homelessness Challenge, and Joe has come out and actually covered some of the work that I've been doing with encampments over the last 2.5 years. So I understand that it would take a miracle for me to broach the top 3 in this race or even win. But I do believe in miracles, and I'm leaving the door open to that. And there is a miracle called democracy and ranked choice voting. So vote with your conscience. Listen to the things that I'm talking about, because no matter who wins, whether it's myself or someone else, I want to work on serving the city in order to heal these issues. And I do have a platform that's ahead of its time politically, but it's very pragmatic in what can be implemented. And so there's a card that I've been passing out tonight, and I'm going to go ahead and read the things that I think whoever becomes mayor, we should be making sure to evaluate and track progress over the next year. Transition 3,000 to 3,500 unhoused residents out of crisis conditions. Prevent tenant displacement by funding rent subsidies and eviction defense. Prioritize and finance new development with at least 50% affordable housing. Invest in unarmed programming to heal neighborhood crime at the root. Invest in early childhood education and child care for San Francisco families. Manage DPW's budget more effectively in service to cleaner streets. They have a big budget, we can do better. Activate vacant units and storefronts via new legislation and programming. I'm the only candidate who's actually put forward a tax that we could actually start to discuss and implement to be able to activate those units. Support the financing and construction of additional dwelling units. Initiate a task force to locally regulate Uber and Lyft and support taxi drivers. Ensure the Central Soma plan doesn't lead to tech boom displacement 3.0. Link local hiring to SFUSD, CCSF, and SF State students and graduates. Support environmental justice for Bayview Hunters Point residents. Invest in community integrated mental health and addiction programming, and support equity businesses and compassion programming for the cannabis industry. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Mark Leno, and I want to thank the Neighborhood Network and Daniela and our dear friend Jerry for helping bring us all together tonight. As you know, I'm a small business owner for 40 years here in San Francisco. I've also served on the County Board of Supervisors for 4 years, State Assembly 6 years, State Senate 8 years. I want to take a moment to bring to your attention something that has disturbed me greatly, and I suspect you as well. I don't know if you could all see this, but it's a hit piece on Jane Kim that came in the mail. It's been on television. It's funded by a super PAC that is supporting Supervisor Breed. It is funded by the Conway money machine, and I want to do what I can to put a stop to this kind of campaigning now. We have only 4 weeks left to this campaign. We have all signed a pledge that say that we will denounce, renounce, and reject any super PAC spending either on our behalf or against any of our opponents. All of us have signed it. Unfortunately, Supervisor Breed did not. If she were here tonight, I would ask her again, why not? She has signed her own pledge, but in it, she said that she would denounce publicly any negative campaigning on behalf of a campaign or a super PAC. And she has been silent on this and on the television commercial. There's no need for this, and there is no room for this kind of campaigning. It has nothing to do with the issues that are before us today. So I just wanted to put that out there and to again urge all of the candidates in the race to denounce this kind of hateful campaigning. There's no room for it in this campaign season.
Bravo.
So I am running for mayor because I believe it is time for a new direction at City Hall. Our crises of homelessness, housing affordability, availability, the rise in property crime, the mess in our streets are out of control. It's time for fundamental change at City Hall. The status quo is not working. So we'll be getting into the issues that are before us through the evening, and I will be able to talk about the proposal I put forward, serious detailed proposal to end street homelessness by 2020. I want to use the expertise that I've garnered over the years in the state legislature when we raised the state's minimum wage to $15 an hour, first state in the country to do so, giving a raise to over 5 million California workers, lifting 2 million Californians out of poverty as we make it illegal to pay a poverty wage in California. Additionally, amended the Ellis Act to exempt single-room occupancies, SROs, protecting over 12,000 of San Francisco's most vulnerably housed. Thank you all for being here tonight as we dig into the issues.
Good evening, everyone. First of all, so fantastic. So many of you are out. I mean, this campaign has had 400 people come out almost every other night. We've been in like 2 panels, sometimes 3 panels a day. So it is so fantastic because this is a critical election. And quite frankly, I think the fact that London doesn't come is a problem. Up to your mouth. Up to my mouth. Like that. Okay, I got it. I'm Angela Alioto, 3 generations San Francisco, 3 generations. My dad was born and raised in North Beach. My grandmother Alioto was born and raised in North Beach. I'm a mother of 4 and grandmother of 5, and I've lived here my whole life. I'm in this race because of the condition of our city. I believe that tech came into San Francisco and came in with so many employees and came in with tax exemptions that we didn't give our small businesses. We only gave to millionaires and billionaires while our small businesses are suffering. And then the homeless population began to increase again and again to the point where there are people actually living in tents in our city as though it's another city within our city. The poverty is overwhelming. There's no reason for people to be living in our streets. From 2004 to 2012, we did a homeless plan for chronically homeless. That's people live on the street for 4 to 6 years, generally speaking, triple diagnosed, people very difficult to get off the street. And we housed over 4,600 people with a 94% rate of recidivism, meaning they're still in those apartments and units that we put them in a good 10 years ago. That homeless plan is a huge success story, and it's something that when everything started happening here in 2012 and 2013, the homeless plan was defunded, and we took the buildings out of it, so there was no place to take people. Like what happened last week with the sweeps. You can sweep people all around town, but if you don't have a place to take them, it makes no difference in the world, and it's totally a political ploy. But we do have places to take them. We have lots of units in San Francisco where we can take them. We have beds. We just opened 58 beds at St. Mary's for the mentally ill. Mental illness is a big issue of mine. I created the Mental Illness Advisory Board when I was president of the Board of Supervisors, along with, is that time already? Yeah. This always happens to me, ladies and gentlemen. I have a lot more to say.
We each have a mic. Good evening, my name is Jane Kim. Thank you, State Senator Mark Leno, for standing up and speaking about the attacks that we are already now seeing in the mayor's race today. And for anyone who questions my commitment and track record to women, I just hope that you will look at what I have done, including raising our minimum wage to $15 an hour, one of the strongest minimum wage ordinances in the country. 2/3 of minimum wage workers are women. And my initiative right now, Proposition C, to dramatically expand access to child care and early childhood education for all San Francisco families. It has been my honor to serve a little over the last decade in elected office here in San Francisco. I started out on the Board of Education and now serve on the Board of Supervisors representing a sister district, including the South of Market, Tenderloin, Mission Bay, and Treasure Island. And over this time, I've been proud to lead many fights with you. First, to make San Francisco the only city in the nation to make community college free again for all of our residents. And we did that via an ultra-luxury real estate transfer tax on property owners of $5 million and above, and generated $40 million that not only made City College free, but also took street tree maintenance back from private homeowners back to the hands of the city as well. I'm currently working on a commercial grocery receipts initiative, Proposition C, to dramatically increase access to childcare, taking off tens of thousands of families that are on the wait list for childcare, as well as expanding subsidies to middle-class families that make up to 200% of average median income. I'm also proud to have negotiated and won more affordable and middle-income housing than any city legislator over the last year, and to also have authored Eviction Protection 2.0, strengthening protections for our tenants, in particular seniors, immigrants, individuals with disabilities that have been faced with low-fault eviction rises over the last couple of years. Thank you very much, and I look forward to the dialogue.
Thank you.
I have a request. The air conditioning system is a little intense. If it could just be toned a little bit, it would really go on.
It's about to get hot in here, but all right. So yes, Francesca, if you don't mind. It's
Not looking to have it turned off, but if you could turn it down a little bit.
All right, well, let's turn up the heat. We're going to talk about this conversation we're going to have here. It's an exercise to get us talking about some of these issues. If a candidate on the stage hears something that you disagree with, pipe up. If you agree, feel free to say so. We want to keep this civil, but we want to keep it flowing. So I will be jumping in from time to time, but I believe they call this a debate. So we're going to get a little into some debating here. But that will be the first half of the program. We will have an intermission in the middle where we will have some folks come up and say a couple of words, and then to the questions. And many of you have filled out those forms. So, but most importantly, as for this conversation, we are going to beg you to break away from your talking points. Should we have them break away from their talking points? Yeah! See how popular that is? Most of these questions, we're not going to ask you about your 10-point plan. It's on your website. And if you start down that track, I will jump in. I'm just going to gently push you back to the question at hand. So with that, let's begin with the housing crisis. And especially the exercise and frustration that often devolves into unproductive nastiness around this conversation. Supervisor Kim, there are more people than houses. There are more people than houses. That is the mathematical fact. Can we really legislate our way out of this problem?
There is a housing crisis here in San Francisco, but it's not just a housing crisis. Can you hear me better now? There is also an affordability crisis here in San Francisco. There was a time in our country that we, the government, used to be in the business of building housing. And between 1940 and 1980, HUD's budget was larger than the Department of Defense. And during that time period, homelessness was not an urban crisis in cities across our country. When we decided that the market would take care of housing, the poor, the working class, and now the middle class, that is where we went wrong. Housing is a very different type of good. And having worked a lot on housing developments in my district, which currently oversees 80% of all of San Francisco's development, I know that housing for poor, working class, and now middle class do not pencil out for market rate developers. In fact, they cannot get financing for it. So there are two problems. One, that we don't have enough housing, which we can do legislation to build more housing. And the second, which is far more difficult, that we can't build enough affordable housing. Now, I am not of the opinion that if you build as much housing as possible, that we will suddenly start housing everyone. It is not a simple supply and demand issue. And San Francisco is not the only city that must contribute to our housing crisis. We need the entire state of California and the region to build as well. So here in San Francisco, a couple of things that we can do. One, it is true, height and density along transit-oriented corridors makes sense, and certainly in the district where I represent, where I have done height and density in exchange for building more affordable and middle-income housing. Because as I confer height to your land, as I confer value, I'm basically giving you money. So in exchange for giving you an additional floor or an additional 3 floors, I ask you to do more than the basic minimum obligation of building affordable housing. And that is how I've won 20, 25, 40% affordable and middle-income housing.
Do all the other candidates believe that legislation, that a mayor can actually affect that difference? Can the mayor really do that? We've seen mayors try to take this on. Good.
Oh, I believe they can.
Have a seat, we'll just do it sitting there.
You just want us to jump in? That's
Jump
really
in.
fun. We have not been able to jump in anywhere. I'm loving this. I absolutely believe that the mayor is a very, very powerful position. And if the mayor wants to do housing for teachers, for police, fire, emergency services, it should be in San Francisco, for our firefighters. If the mayor wants to do specific housing for those groups of people, they easily can. For the elderly and of course for the formerly homeless. A very powerful mayor can do that. What has boggled my mind during this campaign is what people call affordable housing. Right. Affordable housing in the city and county of San Francisco is $130,000 a year salary. That's not what regular people make. And maybe what a lot of the new employees coming to town make, and maybe even more. I heard young kids the other day saying they make $280,000 a year and they can't find a place to live. I'm not talking about them. I'm talking about teachers and nurses that make $40,000, $50,000, $60,000, $70,000 a year. The mayor of San Francisco can have a powerful, powerful effect on giving them specifically housing, and that's what we need to keep our eye on. Instead of trying to house the immediate world, we need to house those that are absolutely essential for a city and know what they are.
It's a strong mayor system, but really, how much can a mayor do? And I should say, the candidates can remain seated, so you can just pick up the mic and pipe in, however you want to do it. And I'm sorry, I didn't mean to sit you down, I'm just saying.
I'm not worried, Joe. You're not sitting me down.
Just to put a button on this, there's, what's realistic here? There are so many disparate voices. Can the mayor really be all?
Let me just add one other thing. My father, Mayor Joseph Alioto, created model cities, and that was to keep the African-American community in this city. We've gone from 32% to when I was board president, 14% to 3%. Wow. That's shame on us.
So I pipe in here. So I'd love to say, number one, we get more build for our buck right now with additional dwelling units. I proposed when I ran for mayor in 2015 a program that would help with the financing and construction for additional dwelling units that can be built for $200,000 a unit rather than $500,000 to $700,000 a unit. If I had become mayor in 2015, we would already been moving forward with that. We have the opportunity to expand the mayor's office of housing online registration system so that if we do have our workforce and our families and residents that are currently paying more than 30% of their income for rent or have been displaced, they can be part of this registry. And then as mayor, I will also work with property owners to help them activate those units that are currently empty, some of them needing rehab, if they agree to rent to someone, a teacher, a nurse, a family, at no more than 30% of their income. Another connect the dot, I'm probably the only mayoral candidate that when I talk to the SFers retirement board and I talk to some of those members who were former city workers, I said, how many of you know that we have $500 million that's currently invested in fossil fuels that we've been trying to divest from? What if we could work to divest that money, but we do public-private partnerships? So we focus on 50% affordable housing, which already has reduced risk through SB 35, which allows us to take off a year of that process for review. So we focus on 50% affordable. The market rate is financed by the market rate. We get the moderate that's financed by SFR's pension fund or other pension funds, and the city picks up the financing for the zero to low interest financing for very low income and low income.
Senator Leno,
lots of ideas.
sorry, let me move on. About housing.
I like the free flow of this, but I also am concerned that a couple of my colleagues got their 2 minutes interrupted, so I will be able to go back to them as well. So, the statistics speak for themselves. Only about 10% of San Franciscans can afford to purchase market rate housing, and only about 15% of us can afford to rent market rate housing. So when we're talking about affordable or below market rate housing, we're talking about housing for just about all of us. So one way that we get below market rate is through our inclusionary zoning ordinance, otherwise our affordable housing ordinance, that mandates that a percentage of all new market rate development must be below market rate. That was a bill that I authored on the Board of Supervisors in 2002. And since then we have built thousands and thousands of units of affordable units. It represents about a third of all the affordable units that we're building right now. But as Supervisor Kim pointed out, we can do more than the current mandate, which is around 19-20%, because we know that at Pier 70, for example, they're building a couple thousand new units along with open space and places for artists and for retail. Great development, voters approved it, and they're doing somewhere between 35 and 40% below market rate. We know at Mission Rock, we can also do 35 to 40%. So it's not conjecture. We don't need another study to tell us. I would amend our inclusionary zoning ordinance as mayor, something the mayor can do, which would require that if your project fits the model of these other projects which are doing almost twice what the current mandate says must be done, then we're going to increase it to 35-40% for you. We cannot afford to leave anything behind. As chair of the Senate Budget Committee, I was able to convince Governor Brown to let San Francisco proceed with the construction of 3,300 affordable housing units at former redevelopment sites, and I brought back $500 million to expedite that construction. So there are ways that we can do more, and we must, because too few of us can afford market rate housing.
And one of the problems here is when we have these conversations about housing, it goes something like this. Large numbers of people are moving into the city and there are not enough homes, so developers say the solution is to build more. Neighborhood advocates say, wait a minute, slow down. We want to make sure that the development matches the character of the neighborhood. North Beach right here, there's no Starbucks in this neighborhood. There's no McDonald's.
Yeah.
That's not by accident, right? But look, the developers lay out the proposal. Here's the point I want to get to. One second. The developers lay out a proposal, and you did that.
I did the Starbucks out of North
Thank you,
Beach.
because I got a cafe too.
20 years ago. I said,
The
not North
developers
Beach.
lay out a proposal, right? And it's an opening gambit, and it's often over the top because they know it's going to be compromised, right? So they often go over the top and push the envelope. But here's the question: how do we break that cycle? Because there's a lot of ugliness surrounding that conversation. You have developers, with a lot of money laying all this stuff out. You have neighborhood folks, including the folks who are hosting this particular event, and they feel like they are being run over by the developers.
I'll take it
Feel
away.
strongly about that.
So I started an organization called Neighbors Developing Divisadero back in 2011 because of this issue where, if you look at an analysis of what happened after the global financial collapse, instead of figuring out a way to build a new type of economy that meets the essential needs of our residents and works to build in an inclusive, sustainable, and culturally enriching way, we catered to the developers, the banks, and the property owners. So now we have this opportunity to do things different. And when I started Neighbors Developing Divisadero, my focus was on how do we have partnerships with these developers. And so I would sit down with developers and I would show them this survey that I'd done with my 900-person mailing list. And I would actually
interject here. The question is about how do we break the cycle of this ugly conversation?
Sure.
Will it be the case that it will be incumbent upon the mayor to bring different sides together into a room, right, and have them slug it out and come up with a solution? Like, it's one thing to have something on your platform, right? It's another to bring these sides together.
I've done it.
And
I'm telling you, with
how do we-
Neighbors Developing Divisadero,
How do we
I
get
did
past
this work.
the ugly conversations that are taking place between developers and neighborhoods?
And let me just add one more thing, is that when I did that work, for some reason when the planning department does a proposal for a new development, they wait for 2 years really before, when they've hammered out all the details to introduce it to the neighborhood for review. I changed that process in my neighborhood. So that's a very particular thing, is that when the proposal from the developer came forward, I sent it out to all the community groups and we provided that feedback immediately to the developer.
You guys are not used to debating. Please chime in. So the question at hand is putting people in a room and being a leader and pushing through and telling everyone in the room, you're not going to get your way, but we're going to forge a new way that perhaps solves the problem incrementally.
I would make the argument that San Francisco has not been doing a good enough job negotiating on the city's behalf, that it has been negotiating on the developer's behalf, and so there are such things as community benefit programs and requirements that if you developer are going to get your entitlements to build, that's a license to make money, that we, the city, and our communities get something back. And one thing that we haven't been doing a good enough job is making sure that we are hiring locally. If tens of thousands of new jobs are going to be created, why should it be presumed that they're all coming from out of town? How many of those jobs could be filled by San Franciscans who would be paid better wages than they're getting presently? And when that worker is getting better paid, the difference between their income and the cost of housing is reduced. We don't have to be concerned about someone being displaced from their rent-controlled unit because someone's coming in from out of town to take that job. We don't have to build another housing unit for that San Franciscan, and we don't have to expand Muni for that person because they're already here as well. So many benefits to making sure, either with carrot or with stick, that there are going to be San Franciscans hired. And that plays into a whole proposal we have to make sure that not only we have free city, but free state.
Or the candidates, sorry, on the next table, how do you get these people in the room? And how do you, what's your process by which you've had to have these negotiations, right?
I mean, for the past 7 years, I've negotiated almost all of the major development deals here in our district and in our city, and I actually disagree with that. Developers and neighborhood leaders and labor have been able to get into the room. That's how we won 40% on the Giants baseball parking lot at Seawall Lot 337. That's how we won 40% on the Chronicle site at 5th and Mission. It's how we won 40% on 160 Folsom. By the way, I have to define affordability in all three of these projects. So on the Giants parking lot, Seawall Lot 337, we negotiated 40% affordable housing for households that make between $45,000 a year, households of 4, all the way up to $150,000 a year. On the 5M site, it was formerly homeless, so 0% of average median income, all the way to 150% of average median income. And for 160 Folsom, thank you, we did 40% on-site, just middle-income home ownership units for households that make roughly between $80,000 and $120,000 a year. So we do build for a broad spectrum of folks, and in fact, the housing for the formerly homeless is already in construction right now in Eddy and Taylor, and we've always been doing it by bringing community, neighborhood leaders, labor, and developers to the table. So it
What's
has
your
been
process?
done.
What do you say to them? When you get them in the room, what are you saying to these folks?
Well, you say their project's not going to get approved until they come into the room and they negotiate with the community. Developers make millions and billions of dollars here in San Francisco. They need to share that value back in the city that they build in. But the reason why they make so much money is because we have made this a great city to live. People want to live here because of our work. So they need to share the profits that we actually help them generate by building open space, investing in public transit, investing in our schools and childcare.
But they don't.
But
they don't.
They don't do enough, I agree with that.
They don't.
But that is what we've been doing over the last 7 years, is negotiating that. But what I have to say is that the mayor's office has not been on our side on these developments.
So why didn't people run against Ed Lee? Why am I the only person that ran against Ed Lee in 2015 rather than endorse him?
I just want to say that we have a law called MBE-LBE, which is for local hiring. That law is supposed to be hiring of 18%. We wrote that law in the 90s. Today, the hiring of local people and minorities and women, LBE, WBE, MBE, the hiring is 4%. So we're just not following the law. I really think that where there's a will, there's a way.
Senator, you spent some time at the highest level at the state senate. How do you get these people in a room? What do you say to them? What do you look them in the eye and say what to get to forge forward?
Well, I'm going to underscore what Supervisor Kim has already said. We have, and she in particular, has been a great negotiator. I don't know that the mayor's office has done the best job in negotiating, and that, of course, can wind into all the big money that circulates within City Hall. We want to make sure we keep as much of it out, and that has to do with the whole theme of super PACs, but that's another story. In any case, they want something from us, we need to get something back, and that is what the negotiation is all about.
Does anyone here believe that it is the mayor's role to advocate for the neighborhoods as opposed to just being the neutral arbiter when we develop these talks?
Absolutely. Not only that, but when the companies come to town that are getting these tax incentives and our stores are closing up, there are vacancies all over the place, we have the poor living in the street, when they come to town, they have to give back to what we, the city, want them to give to, not what they want to give to. We hear about how generous they are, and indeed they are, but they're giving to what they want to give to. We need our neighborhoods, we need our small businesses to be totally supported, and they're absolutely abandoned.
So one of the things that we can talk about after we correctly said that San Francisco says no to Scott Wiener's SB 827 and having 8 stories all over the city, in these neighborhoods that are single zoning, that are RH1 zoning, one of the things I would do with Mayor is actually work with these neighborhoods to figure out what are 3 to 5 unit buildings up to 4 stories that would actually work with the neighborhood character. And you can talk about how we can design these so that they fit into the neighborhood. I've lived in buildings that are 3-story high and Victorians. Victorians were a model that were put all over the city. There's an opportunity for us to discuss what would work for you. And then there's an issue of parking because people don't want to lose parking spaces. So you can actually have that discussion of how many parking permits would be allowed in up to 4 stories. But throughout the city, mostly in the neighborhoods, you have the ability to build up to 4 stories currently, but with RH1 zoning, you can only build 1 kitchen. And we changed that with conditional use zoning for additional dwelling units, but we need to have that discussion in this RH1 zoning all over the city and think about what are the types of buildings that could actually work in here so that when someone's selling their home, there could be this opportunity of building a 3-story building for families and workers.
The development process is purposefully slow. It's after years of neighborhoods speaking up and saying, hey, we've got to slow this down. We need to make sure that whatever is being developed works for the neighborhoods. But how slow is too slow? We have a crisis right now.
So
we have a crisis. How do we
By the
How
way,
do we
it's
get
still
through this
really
without
cold
building?
up here, so I don't know if we can do something about that. But to talk about the entitlement process, I actually support our current local entitlement process. Now that I have participated in it, I believe that it works because how we have won more affordable middle-income housing is because local neighborhoods and community get a say against billions of dollars in terms of the types of projects that get built. What we have to fix is the post-entitlement process. So post-entitlement, once the developer has jumped through the hoops and gotten approvals from the community and the supervisors and the mayor, that is where we should be streamlining the approvals process to help the developers build and get the shovels into the ground and get through SFMTA and PUC and Public Works. We have over 30,000 units of approved housing projects that aren't building at all. And so we have to make sure that we get these 30,000 units built. There's primarily stuck in 7 major projects throughout the city: Treasure Island, Park Merced, Candlestick, Executive Park, Schleichlock, and Hope SF. And one of the biggest obstacles that these projects face is 1, the permitting process through the city, and 2, the building of infrastructure. Developers are having a very hard time financing the sidewalks, the sewage, the electricity grid. One thing I propose is that we set up a citywide IEFD, Infrastructure Enhancement Financing District, so that we can help finance the infrastructure to get these housing units built on the ground. And by the way, many of these projects have committed to higher levels of affordable and middle-income housing as well.
How slow is too slow?
So, time is money for developers, of course, so we can use the carrot and stick approach. And for those projects that will have greater percentage of affordability to them, which will serve our neighborhoods and will serve our communities, they should be expedited. And there is already law that says if you are a 100% affordable project, you will be moved through the process the most quickly, and that is appropriate. And for those developers who are fighting the inclusionary mandate or trying to get as low as possible, there should be greater scrutiny, and they're going to recognize that if they work with the city and provide the benefit that the city needs, that they'll see their projects raised to the top of the list.
As was mentioned before, there's also SB 35 that streamlines 50% affordable. And one of the issues that we hear often from developers is that it doesn't pencil out. And that's why I'm really pushing this new financing mechanism of public-private partnerships, where the city provides the zero to low interest financing for the very low and low income housing. We partner with pension funds that are already doing AFL-CIO as a pension fund actually has put the money in to finance a number of projects so it would create opportunities for their workforce. And that's another thing. We need to actually, one of the big hangups right now is that we don't have enough construction workers locally. There's so many people that want jobs in San Francisco, and there's an opportunity for us to build up our workforce through city build, Asian neighborhood design, CCSF, so that the people of San Francisco are building and maintaining San Francisco.
That actually is the truth. There are not enough workers. I need to pivot into homelessness. We only have so much time. Very difficult issue. We got an email from Pierce Buxton who says essentially that we have a problem with mental health as a big piece of the homelessness problem. How can a San Francisco mayor address this situation when the state believes putting homeless people in institutions against their will is unfair? Have we reached critical mass?
Well, first of all, I don't think the state has decided that. Supervisor Breed and Senator Wiener just did a conservatorship issue where they're literally going to conserve people, which means 7 days a week, 24 hours a day.
Right, it's a proposal. It is the case now that the state believes that putting a
But they're doing things that go overboard, and that's way too severe. The problem is we don't have advocates. San Francisco needs to ask for funding from the state and from the federal government. When we had the 10-year plan, we received more federal funding from a federal homeless czar under George Bush than we've ever received in the history of our city. We need to advocate, we need to do the grants, and we need to get the money. But this is a $10 billion budget. We don't need any more money in this budget to house the homeless. It's a very easy thing to do when you start utilizing the SROs and all the empty units in this city.
Right here in North Beach, a lady 2 weeks ago stabbed 2 people with scissors.
Mental illness, I mean.
Mental illness.
It needs to be taken care of.
I want to drill down. That's serious. It's all serious, but that has really rattled a lot of the folks right here in this community.
That's a crime.
Currently, we are recycling folks with mental health, behavioral health, and addiction issues through our criminal justice system. They interact with police, they find their way to county jail, and 50% of those in our county jail are receiving mental health services. About 20% are being prescribed psychotropic drugs, and no one is getting better in a jail cell. So criminalizing mental health and addiction issues is not a good use of limited public funds. An alternative would be to create a mental health justice center where folks would, as an alternative to county jail, would be assessed and diagnosed and treated. And then, of course, rather than put back on the street without a caseworker, without a health plan, treatment plan, and the cycle repeating itself again, making no progress whatsoever, spending public dollars, that we would be able to deal with the crisis. And then, good news is, I was able to identify $100 million for San Francisco, $2 billion statewide for the singular purpose of building permanent supportive housing for people with mental health and addiction issues. We should be getting our $100 million from the state later this year. We could build upwards of 400 units of permanent supportive housing specifically for this population. The concept is housing first, that if you're trying to deal with someone's mental health issues on a corner, you're not going to get too far. But if you can stabilize their lives under a roof, then we can begin to deal with the problem, whatever it is that led someone to homelessness.
The issue is that housing first isn't fast enough right now, because every night that someone spends on the street without access to secure sleep and a place to belong is traumatizing. Imagine that 3,000 people were displaced from an earthquake tomorrow. That's how we should be treating this crisis that 3,000 people are on our street right now without access to a place to belong. I've worked with encampments over the last 2.5 years, and I can tell you that it's a very small percentage of people that are cycling through this system. I've been punched in the face on Market Street. I understand that and that woman that punched me in the face, I saw her the next week on Valencia Street because there isn't enough of this support. But the people who live in encampments, they are actually sometimes some of the best communities that I've worked with in San Francisco because they truly are caring for each other. And some of these people that come into that system and need really very intensive support, everybody on the street knows who those people are. So if we partner with our unsheltered residents and we create safe, organized spaces like I've been proposing for the last 2.5 years, and I'm quite frankly very fed up with Board of Supervisors and City Hall for not working with me and the St. Francis Homelessness Challenge to treat this like a crisis. Because if we work with the encampment residents and we can identify those people that need that extra support, then we can use our resources more wisely.
We only have a couple more minutes, but I see some shaking heads. Anyone else going to chime in? Do we work with the encampments? Are encampments really what we want to be doing?
No,
in the city of San Francisco?
we should not allow any encampments. We should not allow tents, but the point is, quite frankly, I have been doing this for years, in the 90s and the 2000s, and I have never met a homeless person that didn't accept a unit. Never. So that you have to go out there. It's a hard job. It's a very hard job, but if you go out there and talk to people properly, they'd love to have a shelter, especially if they have animals. Our restrictions on everything from the shelters to the units, the restrictions they put on people so they can't get in is a major, major issue. Like you can't take your pet, or you can't have your spouse, or you can't, it's can't. The goal is to put people into a unit so they can have a decent life and even get on their feet so they go out and get a job, which is what we did from 2004 to 2012. But today, the concept of someone in North Beach walking up to you and it's got knives and stabbing and all, we need to get the mental health and we need to get them off the streets. We can't keep saying it's okay. We need to get them the help that they will indeed take.
And we need to wrap up this section, but Supervisor Kim, bottom line here, where do you stand right now? How does a mayor, how would you, if elected mayor, tackle that part of the problem?
We have to build more medical shelter beds. That's just the bottom line. And ultimately the goal is housing. Housing is the cost-effective solution to managing homelessness. But as Amy said, there isn't enough housing units today. So we simply have to bite the bullet and build what is actually more expensive to do, which are shelters, and make sure that they're medical shelter beds. One of the last projects I worked on with the mayor was building a $6 million 24-hour medical respite shelter in my district, staffed by nurses, clinicians, and psychologists. Because our regular shelters actually kick you out if you are too sick because they don't want to be liable for you. And so what we're seeing on our streets, at least with the roughly 3,000 to 4,000 people that are in encampments and chronically homeless, is a public health crisis. Now our homeless count is actually far larger. There's a far larger invisible homeless population that you will never email us about. There are about 20,000 unique individuals that interface with our homeless support system on any given year, and the fastest growing segment of our homeless count, not just in San Francisco, but in New York and LA as well, are working families. They're single mothers with children and jobs. And for that population that doesn't get as much attention, we also have to solve that crisis as well. Because if we don't solve it today, they will be the chronically homeless, down the road, and certainly their children will be too.
Thank you,
so we must vastly expand our rent subsidy program, build affordable housing, strengthen tenant protections and right to counsel for tenants in eviction proceedings. But we have to deal with the chronic homelessness, the 3,000 to 4,000 people on our streets, as a public health crisis.
All right, and with that, I'm going to hand the microphone back to Daniela. We're going to take a little break in the program, drink some water, but we have a couple people coming up to speak.
Okay, Jill Fox, Department of Elections, are you nearby? There she is. How many of you know, you may or may not know who you're voting for mayor. You may or may not know who you're voting for number 2 or number 3. And it can get very confusing, and that's why we have a trained elections professional on her way up to explain it to you. After that, we're going to hear from some extra candidates, very briefly. Jill Fox.
Hi, I'm from the Department of Elections. We've been bringing free, fair, and functional elections to the city and county of San Francisco since 1878. I haven't worked here the whole time. Those of you who got here early, I have this flyer. It has dates, times, telephone numbers, and URLs for everything you need to know. And there's a surprise inside, which is a list of everything we're voting on. So I'll have some in the back, or I'll pass them out while we're here. I know everyone's dying to know how ranked choice voting works, but first, I have to make a quick plea for the Department of Elections. We have 583 polling places in San Francisco. 583, they all need poll workers. That adds up to about a 3,000 member workforce that day. And we're not quite there on our numbers. So if you are free on June 5th, if you would like to serve your city on June 5th, if you would like to learn how democracy works right there in the ground floor, please consider being a poll worker or pass on this information to someone else who is available to work that day. Citizens, legal residents can be poll workers. You apply at City Hall. We train you, and we try to assign you as close to your home as possible. So we are open every day at City Hall to apply to be a poll worker until we fill all the slots. And we're still almost 1,000 people short. Yeah, and we can't do it without poll workers. So please, please help us pass the word. And for that great community service, people receive a stipend between $140 and $195, depending on your level of management and language skills. So please consider being a poll worker. 583 polling places. It's really good trivia at your next dinner party. So ranked choice voting. Ranked choice voting. All of the candidates will be listed in 3 columns identically on your ballot. In the first column, vote for your first choice. In the second column, vote for your second choice. Make sure it's a different candidate. In the third column, vote for your third choice. Make sure that is not your first choice, not your second choice, but your third choice. Make them different. If no candidate, all of our first choice votes are counted. All the first choice votes are counted. If no candidate receives 50% plus 1 vote, then ranked choice voting kicks in. The candidate with the fewest votes is eliminated. Their second choices, people who voted for that candidate's second choices get distributed, and that keeps going, taking off the bottom, redistributing until a candidate gets 50% plus 1 vote, and that vote could be yours. So that's how it works. We have a video on our website, which is sfelections.org. It's also on YouTube. It explains both the marking and the counting using Post-its, because we try to stay within a good budget when we do these things. So we made it ourselves with Post-its, but it's really easy to understand. This flyer has a lot of other information. For those of you who have decided, we're open at City Hall to vote. Monday through Friday, we're down there in the election center, we're ready to go. So thank you. It's your city, your choice. We appreciate you being a voter.
Okay, now, before we get back to our regular programming, we have some other candidates we'd like to hear from. I see Richie Greenberg, and we have yet another candidate for mayor. Am I missing anybody who is running for mayor? Antoine Rogers as well. Yes, we have 2. Okay. I don't see Ellen. Okay, no problem. Mr. Greenberg, can I invite you to come up and take up to 2 minutes, introduce yourself, and then we'll have somebody else.
Okay, hi, good evening. Wonderful to be here. I am a little disappointed that I'm not part of the panel here this evening, but you know, they say that's politics, right? So anyway, Richie Greenberg is my name. I am the GOP endorsed candidate. I'm also endorsed by the LGBT San Francisco Log Cabin Republicans and the Small Property Owners of San Francisco. So I've been here listening to what has been going on. I took a few notes so I could let you know. And again, I apologize for how this is happening and how it works. I see a lot of familiar faces here who came here and are disappointed and unable to hear me speak. But basically, I'm running on a platform of 3 core values, which is accountability, restoring a respectable law and order in our city, and uplifting the quality of life. And taking that to the mayor's office will make drastic change very quickly. I also want to point out that whether it's obvious or not, the mayor's office is a different branch than the Board of Supervisors. The mayor's office is the executive branch. The Board of Supervisors is the legislative, and they're the ones who write the laws or modify the laws or proposals. And so the executive is in charge of enforcing or putting those into play. And what we see right now is we have several candidates here along with me. None of us have any executive branch experience, unless I'm wrong, but I believe that is the case. And so I, as a mayor, will be a strong mayor. I will be the checks and balances that we very, very much need in our city here to either support the Board of Supervisors or to oppose them or to come up with compromise. So for 17 years, I've lived here in San Francisco. I love the city, but I don't love spending other people's money. And I don't love adding taxes on top of taxes and making small business owners pay for what we don't need. And so, yes, thank you. And so this is where I'm coming from. Logic, a small business mind, and compromise. And I appreciate very much being able to speak here. Thank you very much for allowing me to be here. And June 5th, vote Richie Greenberg, www.richiegreenberg.org, and you can find out more information. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we are now going to hear from Antoine Rogers.
Hi. Hi. You know, some of you guys might know me. I used to own a liquor store.
Speak into it.
Sorry. Like I was saying, some of you guys might know me because I used to own a liquor store on 36 and Balboa over in the Richmond district. So I had a lot of customers that liked me over there. Anyway, I'm here. What I'm proposing is getting rid of the homeless the best way possible. That's even if it takes, I want to get rid of the homeless bad because I watched them come to this city. I watched them grow in this city. I want to get them bad even if it takes putting a couple of cruise ships out on the bay just to get them out the first year. I really want to get rid of them and help them out. And about the work in San Francisco, they was mentioning this because I brought this up last week, I thought, that the citizens of San Francisco need the jobs, the construction jobs. They need to be working 50% of them jobs that's out here. I watched generations get displaced because they didn't get the jobs that they was, promised. And so I wouldn't want to see that happen to another generation of San Francisco, honestly. I really would like for the citizens to get their work, and that's it. And one more thing before I get off, I only got 2 minutes. I'm not doing this just for the poor. Honestly, the poor is in and out, as far as I'm concerned. It's a new generation, a new breed, a new San Francisco. But I would not want to see the people of San Francisco have to get this place like I've been seeing. So I really want them to get these construction jobs because they're part of the city, whoever in San Francisco. That's it for right now.
Let's keep it going for the folks who stood up in front of us just now. They are also running for mayor. We appreciate you coming here and telling us about yourselves. How about we move back into some questions for the folks on the stage. Do you like this format, or do you guys want to go back to like 1 minute? I don't know, you tell me. You more comfortable doing the 1 minute thing?
I don't talk.
Yeah, Jane said, I don't like to interrupt people, and I thought that was absurd.
fair.
We've been
That's
kind of trained.
Yeah, you guys have been trained by all these things.
No.
Well, let's try to keep it as a conversation. You're right. I don't like to interrupt people either, but I will. We'll go back to your talking points. No. Well, let's try this. Let's throw out some of the issues that our audience has been talking about. And in fact, several different people put this next question in different words, but essentially it's the same question. How do you plan to engage the tech community in a positive way to leverage their resources, to make them pay? I just added that, to make them pay to solve our homelessness and housing problems and other problems we have in the city. How will we get the tech community on board with helping us?
Can I start? So I really think that there are two separate San Franciscos right now, and the tech industry is in their own world, literally, and the rest of us citizens are in a different world. I know a lot of the CEOs of the larger companies, and they're really wonderful people. They would love to be involved, in my opinion. What San Francisco's missing is coalition building. We don't have coalitions like we used to, where you would have the communities together sitting at the same table. When we created the 10-year plan to end chronic homelessness, we had people that hated each other at the same table. And after 6 months, we came up with an incredible plan that needs to be implemented again. I believe that if you call the Mark Benioffs of the world, who by the way is a good friend of mine, he would love to get involved in doing things that the citizens want, not just what the tech industry is involved in. I honestly believe they have been kept separate in many ways, and that's why our neighborhoods are suffering so much. But I believe all of them would, if you put them in the same room and you tell them this is what we're going to do, I believe that they would absolutely love to do it.
So there's a ballot measure being proposed for November that would modestly increase the gross receipts tax for companies that make $50 million or more, and it'll generate $300 million to build more supportive housing, address the mental health and public health crisis that we're seeing on our streets, and build more supportive services for our homeless. And certainly many of our tech companies will be a part of that demographic. But I think there's a couple of things that we can ask tech to partner with us on. And I always say this work is not altruistic. It is very selfish. I am safer and better off when people have housing. I am safer and better off when people can afford college and childcare. And so whether it is an ultra real estate transfer tax that is making community college free, by the way, which I'm sure our tech companies are partially funding, or our office gross receipts measure to make childcare affordable to every family, we have to ask our companies that are doing incredibly well here in San Francisco to invest back in our city, to make this a better city for all of us, but for them as well. They will benefit with all of these initiatives.
I just heard two different approaches there.
But the final thing that I should say is that without legislation, we need to push our tech companies to do better with their workers and to actually address economic inequity. How do they treat their lowest paid workers? We should move away from W-9s to W-2s, out of the contracting out of janitors, security guards, cafeteria workers, and whatever benefits they're providing to their engineers and programmers, commuter shuttle buses, etc., 3 meals a day. They should be providing to their lowest paid workers as well.
So we have coalition building. I'm hearing this right here.
Janitors, security guards, and cafeteria workers, and not just the programmers and engineers.
So if I'm hearing this right, we have coalition building, and we also have legislation, and we have frank discussions. What else? How do we engage these tech companies in a positive way to help them pay?
I support everything that Supervisor Kim just said, and I just want to say, I grew up in Silicon Valley, in San Jose. I went to Cupertino for community college, so I played on SimCity on a boxy Macintosh computer back in the 80s. I have that iterative open source approach to how I approach policy, and so a lot of people in the tech community, programmers, hackers, really appreciate that approach. I've been working with a group at Code for America, SF Brigade, on creating an open budget tool. Wouldn't you like that in San Francisco? They have that in Oakland. It's called Open Budget Oakland, and there's a group that's working on that here, because one of the most important things that our next mayor is going to be doing is taking that proposed budget from Mark Farrell and finalizing it over the month and a half that they have until the end of July. So we could actually take this open source participatory process with our budgeting, and I will do that as our next mayor.
So we've lost sight of something that used to be so much part of our democracy, and that is the common good and the commonwealth. That there's a gold rush going on right now, and so many folks are coming to San Francisco to get their quick share of it. But we need to put forward public policy that incentivizes long-term investment in San Francisco, not short-term investment. Everyone needs to pay their fair share, everyone needs to play by the same rules, and everyone needs to obey the law. When we see some of these new industries arise, they're illegal by definition. So, for example, short-term rentals in San Francisco. It was illegal to rent for fewer than 30 days. If you did, you needed a hotel license or a bed and breakfast license. But this whole new industry started, well known specifically under the name of Airbnb, and the idea was that we're going to just move forward. It's going to be a very popular service, and then you just try and stop us. So the city had to catch up and design some legislation to regulate this new industry, and they fought us every step of the way. They fought us when we said you have to pay the same transient occupancy tax that a hotel does. They fought it. Well, after a while, they were shamed into collecting that tax, and finally do. When we told them you have to police your own platform, because now it is required that you host must get licensed by the city. And if you, Airbnb, are not policing your own platform and allowing those who are not licensed on, you're complicit to a crime. So again, they resisted, it went to court.
How do you break that cycle, Senator Leno? What do you say to these tech companies?
Sure.
What's the strategy?
I'd like to think that they would get a different corporate attitude, that it means working with the communities in which you serve. It's not about ripping as much wealth out of the communities that you should be serving.
Can I just add an example? Overnight, with nobody's permission, overnight the city's full of scooters, okay? Full of scooters. The elderly are really complaining about it. People with children walking down the street, I complain about it, you hear them coming behind you. What they did is they went right over government to your telephone. It was brilliant when you think about it. That's what Airbnb initially did. They went right over the government. But what blows my mind is that no one is calling them on the carpet and A, getting rid of the scooters until there's a plan, and B, getting them at the table to have a plan. They just totally did an arrogant act, and everybody's saying, well, let's someday sit down and make these rules. No, they have to stop right now and come to the table before they put their scooters out in the street that hurt our people.
Shaming the shameless has not been a successful strategy.
One thing to add to that is that, we do need something such as scooters where we can really address that last mile between Muni and BART to destinations. But why doesn't the city of San Francisco support a worker co-op platform for this, where we're actually creating jobs? Those scooters, they have a shelf life of something like 2 months to 6 months. It's a lot of e-waste, and the people that charge them are earning less than minimum wage. This is happening with the taxi workers as well. And in San Francisco, if I become your next mayor, I'm going to support those taxi workers, and we're going to come up with a locally regulated platform and way to deal with we can't regulate at the local level for Uber and Lyft right now because of state regulations, but we can do enforcement differently to make sure that those drivers are actually following the law. So there's ways to go around this.
I need to ask the next question that's on a lot of people's minds. Across San Francisco, one of our listeners has written, criminals are breaking into cars with impunity. If elected mayor, what would you do to decrease the number of car break-ins?
So we recently, in the last quarter, to give credit where credit is due, have seen finally a decrease in auto burglaries, thanks to people voicing their complaints about the preponderance of what we're seeing in our city. The DA, SFPD are stepping up. One of the things that I propose is that we have a dedicated unit of prosecutors that just deals with auto burglaries. Right now, if you're a prosecutor, you'll get a case docket that ranges from homicides all the way to auto burgs. And what case are you going to drop? You're going to drop the auto burglaries. If you have 2 or 3 prosecutors that only prosecutes auto burglaries, they're not going to drop those cases, and they're going to get a sense of the overall trend and pattern of what we're seeing across the city. Now, I don't have evidence of this, but most police officers will say they believe a small group of people are doing the vast majority of auto break-ins, meaning if we actually catch those individuals, that we can reduce this by over 50%, and we should absolutely be on track to do that. Now, we also have $4 million that's coming to our general fund in overpaid parking tickets. These are tickets that residents and tourists have paid twice, perhaps by accident. Some folks are looking in the room and wondering if that's them. And our office is setting on whether, when you file a police report, letting us know so that we can collect data on auto burglaries. Perhaps we can give you a rebate for the window that just got broken in your car door, to make use of the surplus funds that have come in through SFMT to actually address people reporting auto burglaries. For example, my car got broken into 2 weeks ago. I didn't report that to SFPD, so we can increase the reports.
Is that something the mayor can really do? That sounds like a DA's office thing.
No, that is absolutely something the mayor's office can do. That is $4 million extra dollars that came into our general fund in overpaid parking tickets. That is something that the mayor can do.
But it's not just that. I don't think you should give the district attorney a free pass like that, where he just decides not to prosecute these car burglaries. It's a serious issue. People do get hurt. People should not have to feel like they're not safe in their neighborhoods. I'm for full force funding of the San Francisco Police Department. We need more police officers on the street. We need more police officers working with the community. But the fact that the DA gets a pass, meanwhile he's prosecuting homeless people. I am a civil rights trial lawyer. I often try to get a jury. Sometimes I don't get a jury because the DA is prosecuting people for quality of life crimes, and they're going through a full-blown trial and then go to jail when they should be going to rehab. I wouldn't give them a free pass at all.
Senator Leno?
So it astounds me that this auto break-in crisis tripled from 2011 to 2017, and it wasn't recognized as the crisis it was. It wasn't bad enough when it doubled. We had to wait until it tripled. So we're now finally catching up. Police department is now recognizing that we do need, and I would make sure that we have a property crime unit in every police station, that police officers would carry fingerprinting kits in their car, so if they are on the scene, they can dust the car and get more and more fingerprints into the system, so you don't have to bring your car to the police station. We do know that 70% of those who are doing these crimes are repeat offenders, and that this is an international crime ring in many ways. We've seen suitcases full of laptop computers trying to get on planes at SFO that have all been stolen out of cars here in San Francisco, that they're going to be sold overseas. So why we didn't wake up sooner, I don't know, but the park safe effort now that the police rightly, if belatedly, have put forward, so that every tourist that comes to San Francisco is informed when they get into their taxi, when they get into their hotel room, when they're checking into their hotel, the message is repeatedly told to them: leave your valuables in your room, do not leave them in your car.
And they should say, no, seriously. Seriously, don't leave anything.
That's right. And San Franciscans need to do that as well. And because of the beginning of that public relations and education campaign, it should be on every BART car, it should be on every Muni car. We have seen over the past year a drop of 17%, but we should have been on this long ago.
We really need to use our resources more effectively. There were recently a couple of parking garages that the city runs, and they put some cameras up, and lo and behold, that dropped the amount of break-ins. We need to have the investigative work coming from the SFPD, but I might be different than all of the candidates here, because I don't actually think we need to invest in additional police officers. Currently, London Breed is proposing 200 additional police officers, so I'll just use that figure. That translates into $34 million. Imagine, if you will, if instead of investing in 200 additional police officers, we were to take the 100 sites with the highest crime and public safety issues via 311 and 911 data. We could invest $300,000 of unarmed programming in those 100 sites and still have $4 million to administer the program working with communities. We need to heal in the communities that are experiencing the most crime and public safety issues. That's where we should be investing that money. We need an expanded, unarmed network of crisis de-escalation and eyes on the street, a la Jane Jacobs, so that we can connect to the police officers when we do need an armed person to come to the scene because there's a danger and a risk to life. But in the meantime, let's get more people on the streets who are unarmed and connected to that network.
You know, can I just say, just so that the folks are informed, we're going to lose 300 police officers in June because of retirement. So to say that adding 200 more has a $34 million bill is just simply not right. When we lose 300,
it's on top of that.
When we lose 300, we need to replace them. And in my opinion, we tried 20 years ago, 15 years ago, 10 years ago to get full forcing the San Francisco Police Department, and we just do not have that full forcing. We're down to 1,600. It'll be 1,300. There's a new cadet class coming in that's only 100. I think it's 89. And so we just simply don't have enough police officers per capita, like every other major city in the nation.
I've been to so many encampments where DPW is there, and there are 6 to 7 police officers just standing there. We currently spend $30 million a year on this ineffective move-along strategy with DPW and $20.6 million for SFPD. If we were investing that $30 million in creating safe, organized spaces for people to belong, then we wouldn't have the strain on the police that we currently do.
And that's where we're going to leave it?
Well, now, you know, I just want to say that the other day the cadets were on Lombard Hill, the Curvy Hill, and they were handing out pamphlets to all of the tourists to not leave things in the car. So then I walked 2 blocks, and within the 2 blocks, I saw so many cars with their windows open and computers on the front desk, on the front chair. So I have to say that we have to watch out for our own property also and not add to that problem.
If we want to free up police officer time and availability so that they can deal with car break-ins and home break-ins and keep our community safer, we need to do everything possible to move 3,500 people off the streets of San Francisco living where they should not be, and there will be savings throughout city government. There'll be savings at the police department because they won't be dealing much of their day with homeless people. There'll be savings at the fire department, the runs to San Francisco General in ambulance calls, the savings at San Francisco General, the savings at the Department of Public Works because we're just wasting money cleaning our streets every day because that's a symptom of the problem, our dirty streets. The problem is that we should not have 3,500 people living on our streets. They should have a roof over their head. And I do ask you to go to markleno.com and read a very serious proposal to end street homelessness by 2020. We can do that.
We've got to shift.
If we make that a top priority.
It is time for closing arguments, and I'll ask you to do the closing arguments in reverse order from where we started. But here's my challenge to you. Incorporate the answer to this in your closing arguments. The city and county of San Francisco has a $10 billion budget. The city of San Francisco has a $10 billion budget. Should we be able to solve every problem under the sun with a $10 billion budget? Okay, ready to go.
Okay,
2 minutes each, and we'll please keep it up.
I'll start with the $10 billion budget because people don't often realize that we're both a city and a county. So our budget is not comparable to the city of San Jose, for example, or the city of Oakland, because we also run all of our county jails, our airport, our port, our public health system. In fact, one of the largest pieces, or one of the largest growths in our budget over the last 7 years has been ACA. It's been a $560 million contribution from the federal government to fund Affordable Care Act here in San Francisco. So our budget has only grown as much as our population has grown. I think to just look at the $10 billion budget and say, we have so much money, I think that's an unfair statement because much of it is encumbered both in employees, in public health, in the airport, our jails, in many of the systems that I talked about here today. But as I talk about where we need to go over the last decade, one of the most important and pressing issues that I think is facing San Francisco today is who gets to live here. We have the fastest growing income gap between the rich and the poor in the country, according to the Brookings Institute. Meanwhile, our middle class has shrunk. In 1990, the middle class made up almost 50% of San Francisco's population. And in this data set, we define the middle class as households making between $50,000 and $150,000 a year. So a lot of everyday people. As of 2012, the middle class has dropped to 33%. And my guess is that even over the last 5 or 6 years, the middle class has dropped below 30%. I think that says a lot about where our city is. I want to reverse that trend. I want to invest in the social infrastructure that I believe allows us to support our working class communities and to grow a middle class again. That means investing in public education. I'm proud to have brought in $73 million to our public school system via the Public Education Enrichment Fund, which then Supervisor Tom Amiano initiated, making City College free and working to make early childhood education affordable. We need to invest in affordable housing. We need to invest in street cleaning. We need to double the number of street cleaners and portable monitored bathrooms here in our streets. And I hope that you'll learn more about my platform on janekemp.org. And thank you so much to the organizers and to Joe for facilitating today.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you for asking that question. When we first started this campaign, everybody was talking about a $10 billion budget. And so one night at a panel, I had to say, do you all realize that $1 billion is 1,000 million dollars? 1 billion is 1,000 million. What are you doing with $10 billion? And so then I arrived at the department heads. Now, this is a very controversial stance, and I totally stand by it. Some of these department heads need to leave. They're not doing their job. DPW, are our streets clean? Do you know the DPW director one man makes over $405,000 in a city job of dirty streets?
Not
With all
on
due
my
respect?
watch.
And then in North Beach here, walking down the street, I don't know, I know some of you here know what's happened in North Beach. They're repaving a street they already paved. So I say to the guy, why are you repaving this street? Right? He goes, oh God, it's Alioto. She wants to audit us. Right. I'm going to audit every one of these top departments and know where they're spending the money. So the guy says to me, I'm a subcontractor. I said, that may well be. Why are you repaving this street? And he says, because it's a sole source contract. I said, hold it. A sole source contract without a competitive bid, which is more efficient and less expensive when it is with a competitive bid, should be someone like Picasso if you want a painting. You're digging the street. Can you explain to me how you could possibly get a sole source contract? And he said, well, we're repaving it again because there's more money in the contract. And I said, that's exactly the problem. You get these sweetheart contracts, they've got all this money in it, and you're doing the job 2 and 3 times. You think our citizens don't see you repaving the street like you're some kind of wacko? I mean, seriously. So the point is, I'm going to be very disciplined with these department heads. A, do your job or you gotta go. That goes for MTA, DPW, and Park and Rec. They have billion-dollar budgets. Thank you. You either love our city or you leave, because there are plenty of locals that can do that job for half the amount of money that you're getting and do the job properly, where our streets are clean, the poor are taken off our streets, we eventually have some kind of affordable housing, and we get control of the crime situation.
Thank you,
I just want to say, aliotoformayor.com. Please visit and please vote for me on June 5th. Thank you.
We need to rethink the way we do our budget altogether. Yes, we have about a $10 billion city and county budget. Half of that is state and federal money with strings attached to it, must be spent in a certain way. But the remaining $5 billion general fund is mostly discretionary money. The way we're doing our budget right now, general budgeting, a department head delivers a budget to the mayor's office at the end of the calendar year, pretty much the current year's budget with a little bit more on top for the coming year. There's very little examination of what programs within that budget actually hit its mission and goal, did it within budget, what brought us a return on investment, that our tax dollars were actually successful in its mission. An alternative to that is what was used in the Moscone administration in the 70s, the Agnos administration in the 80s. It's called zero-based budgeting. It takes a little bit more work, but you start from scratch, zero-based, and you build it line item by line item. And that's how we find waste, fraud, and abuse in our budget. And that's what we should be doing. $5 billion budget. Are you telling me we can't squeeze 3% greater efficiency out of it? That would be $150 million right there to fund the many programs that we've been talking about. I want to make sure that San Francisco stays a place where working people can afford to live, that we protect the quality and character of our neighborhoods. And that has been overlooked as we've seen this wave of new immigrants coming in, all for the sake of pursuing the dollar and not the quality of life in our city. We can do a lot better. And I want to propose that we fulfill what we should call the San Francisco promise, learning what we can from Long Beach. Also, with a single unified school district as San Francisco does, invest in fourth graders, make sure that they get to free city, and then provide them a place and free state education as well. We're going to be short of 1 million BA degrees by 2025. We can make sure every kid has the opportunity. Thank you all for being here tonight. Joe, you did a great job. And thank you, Broadway and Long Beach communities.
Thank you, sir.
I was born in 1977 at Alta Bates Hospital in Berkeley, and then 6 months later, my parents moved to San Jose. And on the salary of a full-time appliance salesman at Montgomery Ward and a part-time nurse, they were able to buy a 4-bedroom home in San Jose for $70,000. That same house today is worth $1 million, and they pay a few $1,000s a year in property taxes for it. I was the first generation of my family to go to college. I started off at De Anza Community College, and then I went to UC Santa Cruz, and I had my essential needs met. And so I've spent the following 20 years dedicated to service, to healing and empowering for the greater good. And when in 2011, after I graduated with a master's degree from SF State, I raised an eyebrow like many of you did with the Twitter tax breaks, and I saw Ed Lee's administration looking the other way to Uber and Airbnb, and actually in my neighborhood, allowing a Chase Bank to move in and displace 3 local storefronts to make an unnecessary bank. And I said enough is enough. And I actually believe in democracy. And I actually believe when Grace Lee Boggs says that we are the leaders that we've been waiting for. And so I was hearing a lot of this righteous no, but I wasn't hearing a strategic yes. So I tasked myself with coming up with those solutions. And to be able to live your values means that sometimes you live in poverty. And that's been mostly my experience as an adult, is I live very low income. And when I do have nonprofits, I know how to stretch a budget. As your next mayor, I would actually give $200,000 of the mayor's salary back to support equitable pay, because that's so important. And I know how to stretch a budget like nobody's business, because believe it or not, I earned $14,000 last year on my taxes and paid $12,000 of that for rent. But I think it's worth it, because you gotta hustle for what you believe in. WeissForMayor.com, that outcomes tracker that I was talking about, whoever becomes mayor, remember, we're gonna be doing this dance again next year, because there's another mayor's race in 2019, so we have an opportunity to truly hold candidates accountable to their promises, and we can measure those outcomes with that outcomes tracker. WeissForMayor.com. Thank you.
Until the next mayor's race in 1 year, please put your hands together for our candidates for San Francisco mayor. Also, let's thank our co-sponsors for this event. The San Francisco Beautiful, San Francisco Council of District Merchants Associations, San Francisco Heritage Mechanics Institute, and the Van Ness Corridor Neighborhoods Coalition. From KPIX 5 TV, I'm Joe Vasquez. Thank you and good night.
They only talked about 3 issues over and over. They didn't ask about